Okay, so hopefully you can all see that presentation. Okay, so as I said, today we're looking at chapter 5, text 26. I'll just recite the Sanskrit first. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Kama Krodha Vimuktanam Yatinam Yatachetasam Abhito Brahma Nirvanam Vartate Viditatmanam. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Translation: those who are free from anger and all material desires, who are self-realized, self-disciplined, and constantly endeavoring for perfection, are assured of liberation in the Supreme in the very near future. Okay, so I've got some slides. I've got the purport and some slides, and I've also got some extracts from Srila Prabhupada's lecture on this verse that we'll go through. But before that, I just wanted to look at a few points just from the translation itself first. So we can see, it's basically pointing out specific qualities, if you like, that we need to develop, if we want to achieve liberation in the Supreme, like it says here. So, it's saying to be free from anger, to be free from material desires, to be self-realized, to be self-disciplined, and to be constantly endeavoring for perfection. There's a few different qualities mentioned here that we need to try and develop, we need to try and cultivate. So we'll go into more detail about those a bit later. But I just wanted to point out this, this bit right at the end is quite interesting. It says, in the very near future. Sometimes we read certain verses or certain passages and it says, if you do this, you'll be liberated immediately, or you'll be liberated sometimes. So this is saying, in the very near future. So it's saying not straight away, but not in a very long time either, quite soon, basically it's saying. So I was thinking, why is it specifically saying in the near future? There must be a specific reason why they're saying this. So I was thinking, that we've been here in the material world for such a long time, so many lifetimes. So, if we look at it over that sort of time frame, then it's a very long time. So then near future means basically just in this lifetime. So if we're looking at the whole, so many millions of lifetimes, then just one lifetime does seem like the near future. It does seem very close if you look at it in that way. So, we hear so many times that if we achieve perfection in Krishna consciousness, then it's possible to, go back to Godhead in one lifetime. Obviously, we know from the Bhagavad Gita that if we don't finish, we can continue in future lives and pick up where we left off. But it is possible, and Srila Prabhupada tells us that it is possible to go back to Godhead in this one life. Okay. So I'll just go on to the purport, which I split up into a few sections. Okay. I'll just read this one, and then maybe I can ask for some volunteers to read the next slides, actually. Okay, so this is the first part of Srila Prabhupada's purport, where he's saying, of the saintly persons who are constantly engaged in striving towards salvation, one who is in Krishna consciousness is the best of all. The Bhagavatam 4:22-39 confirms this fact as follows. Yat pada pankaja palasha vilasa bhaktya karma shayam gratitam udgratayanti santaha Tadvanariktamatayo yatayo piruddha Sroto ganastamaranam bhaja vasudevam. So then he gives a translation in the next slide, but I'll just wanted to say a little bit on this side first. So it's saying that of the people who are constantly engaged in striving for salvation, one who is in Krishna consciousness is the best of all. So if it's specifically saying one in Krishna consciousness, that means that's just one category or one kind of person. So there are basically different ways that people try and strive towards salvation. So here it's saying Krishna consciousness is just one of them, but it's saying it's the best out of all of these. So there's many other ways, people try to, gather a lot of philosophical knowledge and gyan, or through karma yoga and through, giving up the fruits of the actions. And, there's various other ways, people try and strive towards salvation through mental speculation, through Sankhya philosophy, as we mentioned earlier in this chapter. So there's different ways, but here it's saying that out of all of these ways, Krishna consciousness is the best. So I'll just go on to the translation for this verse that we were just given. Okay, so the translation for 4:22:39 is, just try to worship in devotional service Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even great sages are not able to control the forces of the senses as effectively as those who are engaged in transcendental bliss by serving the lotus feet of the Lord, uprooting the deep-grown desire of fruitive activities. So it's saying a few things. So initially it's saying to worship in devotional service. And then, just in case there's some confusion or some uncertainty, who are we supposed to worship for our devotional service? Because many people worship different personalities, different demigods. So making it clear, specifically Vasudeva or Krishna, who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the son of Vasudeva. And then it's saying, that there are many great sages who are trying through, various yogic processes, various mystic powers, or whatever it might be. They're trying very hard to control the senses, to control the urges of the senses. But it's saying that, sorry, it's got a bit of a rough throat at the moment. Okay, so it's basically saying that, simply by serving the lotus feet of the Lord, simply by serving Krishna, then we can actually control our senses even better than all these yogic processes and mystic powers and whatever it might be. Just by devotional service, we can control them more easily. And then it's saying that ultimately it uproots the desire for fruitive activities. So that means, for activities where we enjoy the results, that is our desire generally in the material world. So devotional service uproots that desire. Whereas just by, doing meditation and trying to control the senses by our own endeavor alone, this is implying that it doesn't fully uproot that desire for fruitive activities. So even though we're trying hard to control the senses, that desire is still there deep down, that I want to do activities which I can enjoy. So basically sense gratification. That desire for sense gratification, we try to sort of push it down within us by these yogic processes, but it's not removed, it's still there. So after some time, it will come out again in an unhealthy way, and then we'll have to leave our meditation, leave our yogic meditation, and then go back to pursuing material desires because we've not managed to get rid of that desire. So I know normally we have questions at the end, but I just wanted to make it a bit more interactive. So does anyone have any questions or comments or anything to add just on what we've said so far? Anything you'd like to ask? We'll go on to the next part. Okay, so could we would anyone like to volunteer to read this paragraph from the purport?
I can do it, Prabhuji.
Okay, please, thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm just going to make it bigger. Thank you. In the Hare Krishna, in the conditioned soul, the desire to enjoy the fruitive results of work is so deep-rooted that it is very difficult even for the great sages to control such desires, despite great endeavors. A devotee of the Lord, constantly engaged in devotional service in Krishna consciousness, perfect in self-realization, very quickly attains liberation in the Supreme. Owing to his complete knowledge and self-realization, he always remains in trance. To cite an analogous example of this.
Hare Krishna, thank you so much.
Hare Krishna.
So we'll read the example that he gives after this, but just a few more points on this slide. Okay, so as we mentioned on the previous part, Srila Prabhupada is again talking about the desire to enjoy the fruitive results of work. And he's saying that it's so deep-rooted that despite their endeavors, great sages cannot control. So again, we've mentioned that already. So here it's saying, again, just like it said in the translation itself, that it will happen in the very near future. So here it's saying that we quickly, by Krishna consciousness, we can quickly attain liberation in the Supreme. And then it's saying that owing to complete knowledge and self-realization, he always remains in trance. So I just highlighted complete knowledge because, as it's explained in the Bhagavad Gita and other scriptures, that there is various stages or levels of self-realization. So here it's saying that when we're engaging in devotional service in Krishna consciousness, then that is the highest, that is the full knowledge of self-realization, the highest level of self-realization. So we know the three stages of Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. So we know that in the first stage of self-realization, one comes to the understanding of Brahman, or the impersonal aspect of the Lord, or the Brahma Jyoti, the light, the effulgence, which is emanating from the transcendental body of the Lord. So some people aim towards just understanding the Lord in that impersonal form, that formless aspect. But then we understand that when we go further, then we can also understand about the Paramatma, so the super soul, which is the form of the Lord that appears in our heart, that appears in the heart of every living entity, as it's explained in the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna explains. And then, as we know, when we go beyond that, we then can understand Bhagavan aspect, so the highest aspect, which is the personal form of the Lord, the form of Krishna that we try to worship in the Krishna consciousness movement. So that's the highest goal of self-realization, is to attain that realization of Bhagavan. So here we're saying that in devotional service, we attain the complete knowledge because, obviously Krishna is the source of all of those different aspects. They're all part of Krishna, but Krishna is the original. So if we're performing devotional service to Krishna, if we're approaching the source, then automatically we'll gain realization of Brahman and Paramatma anyway, just by performing devotional service to Krishna and understanding Bhagavan. You can understand the other two aspects as well. So that's why it's saying complete knowledge. And then it's saying that when we get to that point, then we always remain in trance. So again, trance, which means obviously samadhi, But again, it's not like the simply meditating, going to the Himalayas and whatever it might be, going in a cave and just meditating and remaining in that meditative state. That is one understanding of samadhi. But the highest understanding of samadhi is simply to be absorbed in Krishna, to be absorbed in Krishna consciousness 24/7. So Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada will say that all my disciples, they are all in trance, they're all in samadhi, because they are, throughout their day, whatever they're doing, they're fully absorbed in Krishna. They're doing all their activities for Krishna. So trance, samadhi doesn't mean inaction. Samadhi doesn't mean doing nothing. It means doing everything that you're doing, but absorbed in Krishna. So that is, Srila Prabhupada says, that's the real samadhi. That's the highest level of samadhi. So, like he says that materialistic person and the devotee, seemingly externally, they're doing exactly the same activities, but one is doing it for themselves and one is doing it for Krishna. So we will hear more about this point later and how it relates to this verse about karma and krodha, about lust and anger. We'll hear more about how lust and anger relates to trying to fulfill our own desires, and Krishna consciousness obviously is to fulfill Krishna's desires. So that's the difference, which we'll go into more now. So as it says here, Srila Prabhupada is just about to give an example. So he quotes this verse, Darshana dhyana samsparshe matsya kurma vihangamaha svanya patyani pushnanti tathaham api padmaja. By vision, by meditation, and by touch only do the fish, the tortoise, and the birds maintain their offspring. Similarly, do I also, O Padmaja. So Srila Prabhupada explains that the fish brings up its offspring simply by looking at them. The tortoise brings up its offspring simply by meditation. The eggs of the tortoise are laid on land, and the tortoise meditates on the eggs while in the water. Similarly, the devotee in Krishna consciousness, although far away from the Lord's abode, can elevate himself to that abode simply by thinking of him constantly. By engagement in Krishna consciousness, he does not feel the pangs of material miseries. His state of life is called Brahman Realization, but the absence of material miseries due to being constantly immersed in the Supreme. So basically, Srila Prabhupada is mentioning that just how these animals can, just by meditating and by thinking of their offspring, that connection is there. Similarly for us, for devotees, if we're acting in Krishna consciousness by thinking of Krishna constantly, then again, we can always remain connected to Krishna in that same way. And if we are in that connection with Krishna, then as it says here, we attain this state of life called Brahman Nirvana. So we're no longer in the, basically, we're no longer in the material conception of life. And because we're no longer in the material conception of life, so as it says here, then absence of material miseries. Because obviously, if we're thinking about things in the spiritual platform, then even if we're still experiencing misery, it doesn't mean that that we won't have any problems in the material world, but it just means that we won't feel any misery from those things because we are beyond that. Because we're constantly immersed in the Supreme. So we get that higher taste, that higher pleasure, that higher happiness. So then all these material miseries at that point feel like nothing in comparison to that. Obviously, it's a very high stage, but it's something for us definitely to aim for. Okay, so that's the end of the purport. So again, just wanted to ask, does anyone have anything to add at this point or anything to ask?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Jolly Mataji, please go ahead.
I'm just thinking about the sages being in a elevated state and they go into trance. And if it's difficult for them, what chance have we got?
Yeah.
to reach that kind of state? Yeah.
No, that's a very good question. Thank you, Jolly Matthew. So, yeah, so basically it's kind of saying that, you know, when I was talking about not performing devotional service, but the other ways, like performing this sort of intense meditation, those processes are what it's saying are very difficult, especially as we know in this day and age, it's practically impossible to follow those processes perfectly. So that's why we don't do that. You know, that's why we follow the process we've been given for this age of Kali Yuga. We follow the process of Harinam Sankirtan, of chanting the holy names of the Lord, which, as we know, is much easier. So yes, it is saying it's very difficult, but thankfully we don't need to follow those same processes. You know, by the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, we've been given this much simpler process. And so because of that, we do have hope. Yeah, so I hope that's okay. Anybody else?
Very bold, very well. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Any other corrections or additions? Okay, we'll move on. So just, you know, just conscious of time as well. Okay, so just got a few slides from Srila Prabhupada's lecture. The lecture is on, I think, on a few, there's a lecture on a few verses, like verse 22 to 27, something like that. So this is just one part of that lecture where he mentions this verse that we're discussing today. So basically here he gives the solution, I guess, to how can we be freed from karma and krodha? How can we be freed from material lust and from this anger and krodha? So again, could we have a volunteer maybe to read this slide?
Shall I, Prabhu?
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Kama krodha, how one can be freed. So just see the same example. We see that Arjuna, he was thinking of the welfare of his kinsmen, and Krishna was asking that you should fight, and he was declining. So this kind of declining is karma, lust, and his own sense gratification. As soon as he became to satisfy the senses of Krishna, then he is freed from his own karma, own lust. There's no more his own lust. His own lust was that he was desiring not to fight. But as soon as he agreed to the instruction of Krishna, he gave up his own lust. He becomes freed from kama krodha. Hare Krishna.
Okay, thank you so much very much. Okay, so we did have a question. Is there a duality in the text? Just thinking of Lord, a devotee is elevated, but when reality sinks in, there's too much to do, too much to achieve even for elevated devotees in the organization. Maybe you could clarify on that question, if possible, you know, about what do you mean by the reality, and, you know, about what we have to achieve, what we have to do. Not sure. Oh, achievement of past. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, obviously, there's so much for us to achieve in Krishna consciousness. Yes, that's definitely. Oh, okay. On a materialistic level. Okay. Right. I see. Okay. So yeah. So that makes sense. Yeah. Definitely, we have so many in our lives. We have so many goals that we want to achieve materially, so that we can, you know, have a, you know, a comfortable life, so that we can also then pursue our spiritual life as well. So, you know, money, food, shelter, housing, everything that we need, and everything that we cannot neglect those things. Srila Prabhupada always says that we can never neglect those things. That's not what Krishna consciousness is about. So yeah, definitely we need to have all of this those things in our lives as well. Otherwise, if those if those material necessities are not there in our lives, then how can we're not really going to think about spiritual life. We're not going to think about higher things if we don't even have the basic standards of living sorted out. Just as, when we're trying to share Krishna consciousness with others, we have to, be at their level, and we can't sort of share really high Krishna consciousness philosophy when someone's still thinking of, this and that on a sort of lower platform. So we have to work where other people are, and in our own lives, we have to work at where we are. So yes, there's so much for us to do. And then we might think, then when do we have the time to think of Krishna? Or when do we have the opportunity to actually focus on Krishna? So, we just have to take small steps, try to introduce Krishna. As we always say, when we start in Krishna consciousness, just add Krishna at the beginning at least. So we have to find the small places where we can fit in Krishna consciousness, and not kind of, if we have huge sort of goals that which seem kind of unrealistic, then it's harder for us to actually then meet those targets or those goals. If we think, I have to do all of these things in my life, then I have to, read for an hour, read for 2 hours, I have to do this, I have to listen to these classes, I have to do all these things. But sometimes if we set too high a target, then we can become overwhelmed. So we have to do something which is achievable for us, and then keep doing that for a sustained period of time. Then when we know, okay, I'm able to keep doing this small amount, then slowly add more where we can. Just as devotees explain in the same way about chanting, that don't immediately jump to loads of rounds when you're not on that level. Just do whatever you can, and be satisfied with that. And then once you're sort of fixed up, maybe for example fixed up on doing 2 rounds or whatever it might be, and then you feel confident, okay, now I'm sure I can do 2 rounds, that's fine, then we can increase it, but not increase suddenly from 2 rounds to 60 rounds, and then go back to 8 rounds, and then go like this, up and down. So I guess, just trying to make it sustainable and practical for us. Otherwise, we'll just become completely overwhelmed and think, well, I can't do anything, it's just too much. So I don't know if that answers the question that well, but that's what comes to mind at the moment. So thank you for that question. Okay, so I just wanted to, we've got a few more slides, so I just wanted to go through this. So here, basically, I've highlighted the point about satisfying the senses, Krishna. So basically, the point is that is how we can become freed from karma and krodha, because generally, as it's saying here, lust is basically trying to satisfy our own sense gratification, trying to satisfy our own senses, and simply by changing that to satisfy Krishna's senses, that is the way we can become freed from karma, free from lust. And as we know, Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita that krodha, anger, comes from karma. He says, Krishna says that lust is our main enemy, and from lust the others come. So by satisfying the senses of Krishna and transferring that lust, as we hear that common phrase, lust to love, transforming lust to love. There's that famous book from Bhakti Tirtha Swami Maharaj about that. So we want to try and basically, our original love for Krishna, our love for God, which has been twisted and perverted in this material world into lust, we want to try and turn it back from lust into the original form, which is pure love for Krishna. So, which means satisfying Krishna's senses. So then, if we become freed from lust in that way, then we can also become freed from krodha, freed from anger as well. So it all starts from lust in that way. So yeah, I'll have to just go a bit quicker. Okay, so then Srila Prabhupada, he goes on to give example of Lord Jesus Christ, which I wanted to make sure I included because obviously it's Christmas, so it's a very timely paragraph to discuss. So Srila Prabhupada says, one who is able to give up this karma, the lust and anger, they are called great sages. Kshama Rupa Tapasvinam. Tapasvi, one who are sages, their duty is they always forgive. They're saying that those who have overcome karma, lust, who have overcome krodha, anger, one sort of, I guess you can say, symptom of that is that they are always ready to forgive people. So then Srila Prabhupada says they forgive any enemy. Just like you have got very nice example, Lord Jesus Christ. He was being crucified, but he forgave all the persons who were engaged in crucifying him. He prayed to the Lord, oh my Lord, these people do not know what they are doing. So this is, I mean to say, the signs of great sages. They are not, I mean to say, angry. So he's mentioning obviously this very powerful example of Jesus Christ, that when he was being crucified, he didn't feel any anger whatsoever to those who were persecuting him. Actually, he was praying for them, and he forgave them. So that's a sign that they're literally completely free of any anger whatsoever. So okay. So I just saw that we had another question. I'll come to that question a bit later. So this is one symptom that we might ask. Yeah, we might ask, how do I know that I've overcome karma and krodha? So this is one way to test ourselves, to understand that how readily am I able to forgive people who have wronged me. That is a very powerful indicator that we have overcome these things, these anarthas. Okay. And I think he gives a bit more about Jesus. Yeah. So then he says, we can give up anger only when you are Krishna conscious. Otherwise, it is not possible. So long we are after our own sense gratification, it is not possible to give up lust and anger. It is not possible simply when you are, why Lord Jesus Christ was able to forgive them. Because he was engaged in God's service, therefore he was able. So it is such a thing. Sarva gunes tatra samasate suraha. We'll just go on to the translation on the next slide of that verse. But before that, he's making the point that how can we be in that position to be able to forgive so easily? So again, we have to be engaged in God's service, as we mentioned before, to be engaged in devotional service. Only by doing that, then we can actually honestly forgive people, even if they've done, great wrongs to us. So we have to be engaged in God's service in order to get to that platform. And and we can understand it's such a high platform that you're able to just forgive anyone for what they've done to you, because it's fully on the spiritual platform. You understand that, if people are doing such things to us, that means they are even more, how can I say, they're even more absorbed in the material world. They're even more absorbed in Maya, in material consciousness than we are, actually. So actually, those who do such things to us, they're they need even more help. They need even more mercy than we do, because they're even more, that's it. They're even more absorbed in forgetfulness of who they actually are. They've forgotten Krishna and themselves to a greater degree than we have, and that's why they're acting in such ways. So if we're on the spiritual platform, we'll understand that actually those people, if they're acting in that way, if they're lashing out at us or whatever it might be, that means actually they need even more help than we do, actually. So that's on the spiritual platform. Okay, so let's go on to the next one. Two slides left. Okay. So all the demigods and their exalted qualities, such as religion, knowledge, and renunciation, become manifest in the body as one who has developed unalloyed devotion for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva. On the other hand, a person devoid of devotional service and engaged in material activities has no good qualities. Even if he is adept at the practice of mystic yoga or the honest endeavor of maintaining his family and relatives, he must be driven by his own mental speculations and must engage in the service of the Lord's external energy. How can there be any good qualities in such a man? So if we go back again, that was the translation for Srimad Bhagavatam 5:18. So so basically it's saying kind of the similar point to what I said earlier, that if we perform devotional service and understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we can understand all the other aspects of the Supreme, so we can have that full, complete knowledge without having to do separate endeavor. So here it's saying the same thing, that without any separate endeavor, just by performing devotional service, all these good qualities, all the exalted qualities become automatically manifest within us. So we don't have to, like it's saying here, it's giving a few examples. It says religion, knowledge, and renunciation. So if we just take those three examples, it's not that we have to do one thing for religion, one thing for knowledge, one thing for renunciation. No, we just perform devotional service, and then all three are automatically covered by that. So it's saying, and this is another point, a very important point that comes up in Srimad Bhagavatam, that we may have so many so-called material good qualities, but they are ultimately meaningless if we're not serving Krishna, because otherwise we're just serving material energy, we're just serving Maya. So ultimately those good qualities, which are obviously worthy of glorifying, obviously it's not that we shouldn't try and enable these good qualities, or if we see a materialistic person who has these good qualities, it's not that we sort of speak badly of them, speak down at them, but it's just that they may have those good qualities, but ultimately nothing's going to come out of them because they're only using them for Maya. So, whatever they do with those good qualities, it's just going to ultimately, it will last for this lifetime. Anything they achieve also is not going to last. So, but if we're performing devotional service, then not only do we have those good qualities, then we're actually using those good qualities for how they're meant to be used. So here, that's why it's making this point that even if we have so many good qualities, but if we're not engaged in devotional service, then ultimately those good qualities are not worth much. So so then Srila Prabhupada says, straight after that, he says, one who is actually Krishna conscious, automatically all the good qualities overtake him without any separate endeavor. So that's the point I just made. Yeah. Okay, so I think, so that answer on the chat, I think, has been answered. Okay, so that's the end of that presentation. So yeah, just at the end, does anyone have any more questions or comments on this topic? Okay. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone, for joining, especially on Christmas Day, I'm sure you must be pretty busy. So yeah, I was actually a bit surprised that there'd be so many people on today. Okay, do we have a question here? So if all three stages of God realization can be achieved by devotional service, then why do some people go through the stages? What are the processes and results from Brahman realization? So obviously we don't have so much time to go into detail in that, but yeah, so obviously just by going through the Bhagavad Gita, we can see that Krishna explains so many different processes, so many, as we mentioned, so many ways of self-realization. And then after going through so much, then he says, but actually just perform devotional service, you don't need to do all of that. So then similar question might be that if Krishna is saying that you don't actually have to do all of that, then why did you spend all that time going through that? Why didn't you just tell me devotional service straight at the beginning? Why didn't you just go straight to the essence? So people may have that same question. But obviously, as we understand, everyone is on different stages, everyone is on different levels. And that's why. So he's not explaining it for Arjun, who already knows all of those things anyway. He's explaining for us, so that those who are on certain stage, then they can follow the processes that are most relevant to them. Or if they're most attracted to, so if they're, for example, most attracted to Gyan, they're most attracted to gaining knowledge, then there's a process for them. If they want to focus on karma yoga, then they can focus on karma yoga. Or those who are already at that stage, they already understand that devotional service is the highest, then they can go straight to that. So it's basically just to accommodate everyone. Just like in the Vedas, we understand that we're supposed to show mercy to all creatures, so therefore we should be vegetarian. But then there are some concessions given in the Vedas for those who are so addicted to eating meat that they can't stop it. So for those people, it doesn't help just saying don't eat meat, because they're so absorbed in eating meat that they can't stop. So therefore, the certain concessions that you have to only eat this meat at this time after doing this prayers, and then there's certain consequences after it. So it's sort of giving that sort of authorized way for those to at least do something. They're at least doing something from the Vedas, doing some kind of Vedic activities, and then over time they will elevate. So that's why some people, as you mentioned in your question, some people have to just go through those stages. And then, so you've said, what are the processes and results from the others? So I don't know, I personally don't know enough to go into detail about that. What are the results from those things? But from Brahman realization, just reaching Brahman realization, obviously we also have to understand, although we're saying Bhagwan realization, devotional service, although we're saying that is the highest, that doesn't mean that the other two are nothing. Like, they're still very high. Like, it's not easy for even us to get to Brahman realization. Brahman realization is still quite high. Paramatma realization is still quite high. So when we actually reach Brahman realization, then kind of, as we were mentioning, Srila Prabhupada makes the point about the state of Brahma Nirvana. So we become free from material miseries, basically. So yeah, so basically the result of Brahman realization is that we basically understand that we're not the body, we're the soul. Like, actually understand it, actually realize it, not just know it theoretically, as we all know theoretically, but actually realize it. So again, that is quite a high stage. At least personally, I can say I'm definitely not on the platform of Brahman realization even, let alone anything higher. But we're aiming towards that, we're working towards that. So yeah, Brahman realization means understanding that position, our spiritual position, our real position. And then we understand the results of Paramatma realization, then we understand that, okay, so we've understood who we are, and then we can understand that even though we've come down to this material world to separate ourselves from Krishna, try and enjoy this world separate from Krishna, but Krishna he never left us for 1 second. He still came down with us in our heart as the Paramatma. So he's still accompanying us, even though we left him, even though we rejected him. So just from my personal thoughts on your question about Paramatma realization, so the result would be, at least for me, I think the result, and it's quite a nice point, quite a nice thing to understand, that Krishna is so kind, he's so loving, so merciful, that even though we left him, even though we rejected him, still he has never left us for a moment, and he's still there always with us. We're never alone. And that understanding can really develop gratitude. That's what I was trying to aim towards, gratitude. It develops a strong feeling of gratitude to Krishna, that regardless of what I have done to you, still you're so merciful that you always remain with me. You always stay with me in my heart. So then we feel grateful towards Krishna. So I think, in Paramatma realization, we can also have, I guess, that feeling of connection is there, because we understand Krishna is right there. So then we feel more connected to Krishna in that way. And then obviously, ultimately, in Brahman realization, we feel even more, Bhagavan realization, we feel far more connected, because we're not just focusing on that form of Krishna in the heart, but actually focusing on Krishna himself, the original form of Krishna. So I know that probably that doesn't answer the question fully, but I think that's as much as I can say according to my understanding at the moment. Okay, so I know it's very late. Anyone just remind me, what do you normally do anything else right at the end, or do we just finish straight away?
Oh, closing prayers, Prabhu.
Okay, what are the closing prayers?
Oh, simple ones, but Prabhupada. I don't know them, but Panchakalpa.
Oh, okay. Okay. Okay, so thank you so much, everyone. Sorry for running over time. But again, like I said, thank you so much for joining, especially on this day of Christmas. And it was a very nice opportunity again for me to be on this session and speak something about Krishna consciousness. So thank you so much, everyone. And I know he's left now, but thank you to Divyanand Prabhu for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Prabhu, for a wonderful, straightforward, clear session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So again, as I said at the beginning, I wanted to dedicate this session to the father of my dear friend, Rasik Rai Das, Rasik Rai Prabhu. So again, if I can just please request you to pray for him, and we obviously pray for all the other devotees who are going through rough times at this moment. There's also been recently two Bhakti Vriksha devotees who are again close friends of mine, Snehal Thakur Prabhu and Rajesh Prabhu, who have both lost their uncles in the last week or so as well. Please pray for all of these devotees. Okay, Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo
Namo Namaha.
Ananta Koti
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Thank you so much for
Krishna
tonight.
Prabhu, thank you,
Hare
Prabhu.
Krishna.
Good night.